2007 wildfire survivor, and I'm a volunteer with United Policyholders, part of their disaster survivor support network. When my home burned down in 2007 in the Witch Creek fires in southwest Escondido, it was overwhelming to say the least, and we were pretty grief-stricken and unsure of how to proceed in those first few weeks especially. But when I learned about a month later about United Policyholders and a recovery program that was going on in Rancho Bernardo, and I started attending those meetings, it was a godsend, and it was what got us through a horrible time and made us realize that we were not alone. United Policyholders has a 22-year history with expertise in insurance and disaster recovery, and they're on the ground in many of the disasters that you hear about in the news. They're the voice and an information resource across the nation on all things insurance. They're funded by only donations and grants. They don't take a dime from insurance companies. They're not for profit and not for sale. I'm a member of their volunteer corps, which consists of people with personal and professional expertise in insurance and disaster recovery. Since I've been through it, I consider myself something of an expert on what I went through. UP, which we often call it for short, has three main programs. Their Roadmap to Recovery, which is the program that helped me immensely after the event. Oops. And they help people solve their insurance problems and meet their recovery needs after the disaster has occurred. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. They also have a Roadmap to Preparedness program, which is basically insurance literacy for most people that haven't got a clue what your insurance covers until you need a disaster, and most of the times you can be pretty surprised by that. In 2007, 80% of our fire survivors were underinsured. So on top of the disaster itself, they had the disaster of not having enough money to rebuild and had to take a lot out of their savings to get their lives back together. UP is a team player. They are big on partnering with all kinds of organizations, both public and private, so that they can set up operations in a community so that they can get help to the policyholders. They know they're going to need it. These policies are hard to read, hard to understand, and they're right there for you, and they want to also be a part of the broader recovery programs that encompass all these other organizations. When you see something like this, it's too late to start preparing. You have to have already done it. You have to have done your action plan, your evacuation plan. You have to know what you're going to be grabbing and running out with, because in the face of this kind of danger, many people are going to panic. They're going to lose the ability to think clearly and waste precious time. Through United Policyholders' preparedness program, you can learn from people who have been through it ways to avoid some of these disasters and hopefully make it more manageable. I forgot on the advocacy and action. This is that third point, advocacy and action. This is something that United Policyholders does behind the scenes. Most people don't know about it. They're working in the courts of law with our legislators to either enact or change legislation so that it's not so difficult on the insurance policyholder. And they're also involved with in the media and in public policy forums trying to get their message out about the importance of understanding your policy and knowing how to be prepared. The Roadmap to Recovery program, which was the big program that helped me so much, was a series of weekly programs that became a model for long-term support. It easily takes 2 years for someone's life to get back to normal after a disaster like this. It's a multi-pronged type of a partnership where they're bringing all these entities in from the faith-based, nonprofits, government. We had the benefit of the 2003 Cedar Fire survivors taking the lead in putting together a really robust recovery program that David Shalinski is going to talk about after me, how they planned and launched that program that we benefited from. The programs consisted of 27 different workshops over one a week that touched on all the aspects of recovery. And they held it at their Rancho Bernardo Community Presbyterian Church in a very comfortable environment with lots of room, very comfortable, even fed us dinner sometimes. They provided child care. It was a great bonding environment for those of us who were still struggling a great deal, throughout that whole process. They also set up a really nice email listserv that was restricted to just the survivors, so that between these workshops we could be communicating with each other on, hey, I'm having this problem with my insurance company. Did anybody have this problem, and what did you do? I'm trying to build, I'm starting to build my house, and I've got this problem. What did you do? So there was a lot of chatter on that all the time, all day, every day. You could always be catching up on what people were going through. The 27 workshops, each presented by subject matter experts, and of course insurance coverages A, B, C, and D were a big part of that, but they also brought in people to help us with legal issues, lender issues, how to choose contractor, what kind of construction you should be considering, do you do solar, energy efficiency, and all that stuff. They all included handouts, which I'll pass this around at the end, but it kind of looked like this, and they had places where you could make lots of notes so that you had information to get you going for the next day. They always had a question and answer session so that we could hear something we wish we'd thought of, so we came out of there with as much information as possible. And then at the end of every workshop, we had these insurance breakout sessions where all of us who had a particular insurance company went off to one corner and everybody's insurance company to another corner, and you got to hear what other people are struggling with within the same insurance company you have, but it may be very different than the problems you may be having. The one thing that became clear out of this pretty quickly was that all insurance companies don't operate the same, they don't process claims the same, and if you even have the same insurance company as the next guy, your claim process could be very different. We celebrated anniversaries for many years after the fires. We had housewarming parties for those who were already moved back home, and those continued for years after. The recovery program they held our hand through until we returned home, and then and even longer, depending on how long we needed them. They were there for us until we were ready to let go of them. So in forming the recovery program after the 2007 fires, David's team of 2003 fire survivors got together and they asked themselves, well, how can we provide all this information that we learned during our disaster, and wish we had probably from someone else, and protect United Policyholders, the church, and all the other stakeholders involved in a real robust recovery program, so that in the face of possible lawsuits. And the key is that as a faith-based organization, you want to keep control of your program from start to finish. You've got to have your disclaimers and disclosures and all that fine print stuff, and make sure that your audience knows what you're providing, and that you're not providing legal advice, and who you're working with. You want to have a point person who reviews and approves the materials, the handouts, everything in advance of the workshop, so you don't have any surprises along the way. And it's good to keep in mind that these disaster survivors are still pretty shell-shocked, and they're going to be extra vulnerable, and they may be struggling with a lot of other issues, family issues, kids that are struggling through the disaster, and we saw some marriages fail in the process too. It was pretty hard to watch. Some people just couldn't make it through the recovery process without some real trauma, additional trauma. When choosing partnerships and volunteers for your program, you've got to make sure you screen your volunteers, because while you'll have a lot of people eager with good intentions to help, they're not all well suited to this effort. You got to look at if they have the right temperament, the right demeanor. Can they mentor people? How are their group skills? Every volunteer is going to reflect on your organization, so it's important that you know a lot about them before you let them loose in really supporting you. Don't assume that you and your volunteers already understand each other. You've got to have that talk with them, make sure you know them so that they are really the right people for the job. This is a sample of the standard disclaimer that was used in all the 2008 workshops at the very beginning. They always repeated it for us, so we always knew it was general education purposes only, not legal advice, although there was so much good information there that was spot on. They have to provide these kinds of disclaimers. Did I skip? Yeah. Okay. To protect your organization from liability claims, make sure you're working with a reputable commercial insurance representative who is experienced in faith-based organizations. You want to make sure that your involvement in hosting these kinds of programs is not something that's excluded on your policy. General liability insurance, of course, is also pretty important to make sure that your good intentions don't turn into any kind of a financial disaster for you. To cover your liability risks, you want to go over liability loss scenarios and your coverage options with your insurance agent. Photograph your assets, your facility, document all your safety procedures and beyond, and then make sure that those records are stored securely. You never know when you're going to need them. Also go over your risk scenarios with your insurance agent to make sure you've anticipated and fixed any and all problems that might occur during hosting a problem. Ask and answer all those what-ifs way before you start a program. Make sure you've got solutions already planned out and keep a record of them and stick by them. Keep records of your volunteers' activities and their time spent on their work. And make sure that at insurance renewal time that you check with your agent again and make sure that there haven't been any changes or new exclusions added to your policy. This is my husband and I, a few months after we moved back into our rebuilt house. It took us about 15 months to get there. Many people it actually took longer. It's a very individual process. But we learned a lot of lessons from the loss itself, from the recovery program, and from the 2003 fire survivors throughout the whole process. We realized that by having that partnership with them, it wasn't as hopeless as we initially thought. We left each workshop pretty energized. We knew our marching orders for the next day and felt actually pretty pumped, like, we can do this. We were stronger and more confident after it. We learned the proper way to push back when we felt we were getting not being treated right, and we learned how to not take no for an answer when we felt like, again, we weren't getting the right information. I just can't imagine how this program, how this recovery would have been had I not had United Policyholders and a recovery program where all these resources come together and really make someone who's completely lost in the program actually start to find their way. United Policyholders has a really good comprehensive website, uphealth.org. It's not just for people who've had a disaster. It's good to look at today, tomorrow, anytime for any insurance consumer, just to know what it provides. Highly recommend it. And I'm going to let David now come up and talk to you about how he and several of the 03 fire survivors planned and launched the program that helped us so much.